guys, welcome to the chaos. We are back live. Now, you might have noticed that I missed my live stream this week, and there are a couple of really good reasons for that. The big one on my end was that, unfortunately, last week I was dealing with a number of personal issues, including getting into basically the equivalent of a verbal row, for lack of a better way to put it, with the contractors that are supposed to be working on my house. We're trying to get an AC installed, among other things, and we found out that they were trying to charge us approximately double the average on the high end for getting a new AC installed in a new heating unit. So that was a thing. But part of the reason we're streaming today and not Monday is that I was able to negotiate something better in terms of a deal with them for the original price. They're also going to, because they're full contractors, they're like construction company, basically. They can do almost anything. I was able to negotiate a better deal for the same price. So that's a positive thing. The bad news is they started work on Friday, which, you know, that's supposed to be a good thing, right? Thank you so much, Akeda. $20 super chat, first of the show. Support for Ripley's operation, EA Artemis, EA Asclepios. Ripley's recovering really well. For those of you who don't know, I have some pet rats. Ripley is one of them. She is one of the 2-year-old, like grayish brown rats that we have. For those of you who don't know, that means she's an old woman because they only live around 3 years in captivity if you take really good care of them. She had cancer, a huge tumor that just sort of showed up overnight, and we were able to get her an operation, but she's been all by herself away from her sister and her friends for the past week and a half, 2 weeks or so. I don't know. I'd have to actually go check the date to see when she got her operation, because her friends and her sister would love to pull her stitches out. So she's doing really well. She's going to be getting them out very soon. I believe it's next week, actually. So that's exciting. Back to what's going on. So, announcement before we get started. I don't know what's going to be happening for the next few weeks because we're going to be getting some major rewiring done and a new electrical panel, which is the story I was trying to tell before I got the super chat. We were supposed to get our electrical panel replaced on Friday, which was exciting, but due to a mix-up with the power company, they weren't able to do that. My power was knocked out for most of the day. I was going to live stream, actually, and that happened. And they had to turn it back on for the weekend. They're supposed to come back on Monday. Hopefully the power company will actually pull through and like show up to do, you know, the inspection and stuff this time and actually shut the power off to the building, because they shut it off to my house to pull out the power, like the power box, but to replace the power box, you have to have it shut off to the whole building. They never showed up to do that. They claimed I called. I didn't. Clearly, I didn't. Clearly, I wouldn't call and cancel having them come out when I'm trying to get my power box replaced. And yeah, so unfortunately, that means that Monday, which is my normal streaming day, I might not be able to stream, because if they're not done by 5 o'clock my time, I won't even be able to get the stream set up ahead of time in order to be able to stream for you guys, let alone get topic prep done and all of that, because I only have tomorrow to do it. So I decided to do a stream today, and I asked the Discord, what do you guys want to hear about? After I found out about this gentleman, JustTheFacts. JustTheFacts is, well, I went digging around through his channel. He's Catholic. That's one thing that I'm pretty sure of. His profile picture that he uses for his YouTube channel is that from a TV show that showed on HBO back in 2017, I want to say, called The Young Pope. Very conservative character. The character that he has on the profile picture is actually the titular young pope, as it were. Oh, thank you guys so much. There's a couple more super chats. $20 super chat from Child of Nyx, because you can't stop me. Hail Eris. Thank you so much, Child of Nyx. And Wafflepocalypse says, wishing you all the best with your AC and Ripley's recovery. Thank you so much, Wafflepocalypse. So, yeah, with the AC stuff, we're hoping the installation will go smoothly. It's just, I'm going to be in and out for what my access to technology is going to be. I'm going to be able to do a lot of research over the next couple of weeks. And of course, as you guys know, this is October, which means I'm going to be doing a lot of, for lack of a better way to put it, spooky topics for my edited videos if I get time to record them. I'm planning on covering some more ancient Greek magic and stuff. We'll talk about that at the end when I do the shill. So all 72 of you, holy crap, there's a lot of you guys showing up. If you guys stick around to the end, I'll be announcing what I'll be putting out. So, Staniel Dasboot, thank you so much. Always gotta love construction nonsense. $20 super chat. Thank you so much. So, yeah, Young Pope is a real show. Yeah, it absolutely was. So, let's talk a bit about who this guy is, because as you guys know, when I decide to respond to somebody in some way, shape, or form, I usually do a lot of research on them first. I will go digging through their channel. I'll go looking up anything about them. Information on this guy is pretty sparse. His channel is actually about the same size as mine. I wouldn't necessarily, I'm going to watch the entire video in context for you guys to see, broken up into chunks, so don't worry. You don't have to worry about like me taking anything out of context. If we've got any of his fans in my audience right now, welcome. Be nice in my chat. I don't put up with the same crap he does. But yeah, we're going to be watching the whole video that I'm going to be responding to. I actually might respond to a few more of his videos in the future because he's wrong about a lot of things. And it took me a hot minute. I actually had to bring a friend in to try to figure out what the hell this guy is all about, because he's got some really weird mixed messaging on some of his videos, and honestly, one of the worst takes on diversity and inclusion I've ever seen from a creator. But this particular video, it was really hard to tell because he uses a lot of right-wing symbolism and even quite a bit of like stone toss. For those of you who don't know, don't look it up if you don't have to. It's a really, really conservative, and by conservative, I mean the kind that like swastikas, comic, and he uses a lot of characters from those in the editing of his videos, which is it's a big red flag, for one thing. But the video that he did here, when I first watched it, I wasn't sure if he just didn't know what the hell he was talking about in this regard, or if he was being disingenuous. So I watched a bunch of his other stuff. And I'm going to have to say, if he really did major in economics like he claims, then he either really just didn't do most of his reading and bothered with the Cliff Notes instead, or he's lying about his background, one or the other, in terms of some of the topics that he's covered in other videos. Again, probably going to respond to a few more, depending on how you guys like what I do here. But this one annoyed me. He gives some interesting criticism toward the end. I have seen it before. I'm going to be pausing it in places. I'm going to play probably 15 to 20 seconds of it at a time and then pause it. It'll be sped up a little bit so the YouTube algorithm doesn't get pissy, because this is legitimate criticism. I'm going to be engaging in good faith, as per always. I ask very, very kindly my audience, and if any of his are here, his audience, please be civil. Please engage in good faith. Some of the stuff he says is going to sound really stupid to those of us who are pagans and have been around the block for a little while. However, that doesn't mean that he is stupid, or that much more other than he's not very well educated on who we are. And I've got good reason to believe that from just the context of this video. We'll go over that when we get there. But I'm asking, please show your best face. Please engage with ideas and not insults. And for those of you that are from his audience, if you want to defend him, I ask that you do so respectfully. My mods are on high alert. We're not just going to ban you for disagreeing, but I am going to ask you guys, please, for the love of all of the gods, or even just yours if you're a Christian, treat us with respect. My audience will do the same. Okay? So, with that in mind, I have everything all set up for you guys to check out this video with me. I'm going to be responding to it in pieces. For those of you who are from my audience, you'll know some of the things I have to say. For those of you who aren't, some of this might be new to you. For those of you who are not from my audience, hi, I'm Aliakai. That's how you pronounce my name. And I am a Hellenist. That means I worship the Greek gods. That is most of what my channel is about. Let's go ahead and get into the video with that in mind. I mean, at least we can kind of start right off with an agreement, though not with this particular slide. We'll get into why this is some BS. All of the heathens in my audience right now are probably raging. But I actually do agree with him. The word LARP is not a problem in and of itself, because LARPing, the actual like practice of LARPing, for those of you who don't know, it stands for live action roleplay, can be very fun for those of us who like it. That said, though, people who genuinely believe in their religions are not LARPing. Like, folkists actually really like to accuse us of this. For those of you who don't know what folkism is, I did a whole video on it. You can go find it on my channel. But folkists often like to accuse non-folkists of LARPing if they don't think that they have the right blood. And the part of the reason I think he doesn't know all that much about paganism is because some of the arguments that he makes that are mixed here make it clear he has very, very tangential experience with our community, which is why if the facts, if you are watching this, this is an educational experience from my perspective. I'm trying to teach you a little bit about us. So I agree with him that accusing people of not actually believing in the things that they do is disingenuous. It's not okay. Uh-oh, are you guys... Oh, no sound from the video? Okay, I see you guys in the chat. Let me back it up and see if I can get it fixed. Let me go ahead and remove this, and I will try sharing it again. Let me see. I hate when this happens. This is extremely annoying. Tech issues. Say, guys, if you've got access to channel members, burn some RAM in the chat for me. Let's see. Stop the screen share. Let's try sharing the screen again. I made sure not to block the sound. And it says that it's sharing the window. So let's see if it'll actually play this time. Let me know if you guys can hear it. Can you guys hear it this time? So did you guys hear it that time? There's a little bit of a delay on the chat, so... Dragon DW, burning RAM is absolutely a humorous thing. Damn it. I don't know why it is not actually doing this. All right, I'm going to try one more thing, and that's I'm going to try screen sharing one last time, and I'm going to see if I can get it to work. I think I might need to use a different browser. I apologize, guys. For those of you that watch this on the playback, tech issues are known to happen from time to time. I'm working on it. So what he said at the beginning there, for the record, was that he hates the word LARP so badly that he's actually banned it from use in his own Discord server. So that he thought that it was disingenuous to accuse people of not believing in the things that they say they do, but that he was going to do that anyway. So I agree with him about hating using the term LARP for anything other than the actual live action role playing itself. Like that is... It's incredibly abusive, for one thing, because you're effectively gaslighting people out of who they are, which, I mean, I know that for a lot of Christians, that doesn't seem like a concern to you guys because, well, like, you don't tend to accept a plurality of beliefs. But for the rest of us, that's not necessarily the healthiest thing. With pagans, we accept the existence of your beliefs. We just tend not to be accepted by you. And that's one of the big challenges, unfortunately, with trying to have a conversation between faiths. My audience will tell you that when it comes to these sorts of issues, there are a number of ways to have this conversation. And most of the time, what I will try to do, at least, is attempt to sort of check things as much from your perspective as from my own, right? Like, I am trying to be as fair as humanly possible. But when you're talking about the difference between a faith that is orthodoxic and believes that, say, for example, you're damned if you don't believe a particular thing, versus faiths that are more orthopraxic, which is most pagan faiths, you're going to have a disagreement in terms of what those values are, right? Like, you and I are going to be coming at this from two completely different sides. That's going to be the challenge for this conversation. Because from my perspective, it is perfectly fine for you to not believe what I do. But from yours, I've got some hell coming my way if I don't believe the same thing that you do. So even starting this conversation feels like it's risky, potentially, from your perspective as the Christian, because, well, if I'm wrong, I'm screwed, right? So this is where it can be extremely challenging to try to have these conversations in general, but I want to try anyway. All right, with that in mind, let's try one last time. I've got everything all set up. I am hoping this time we get another round properly. So let's actually see if my jerry-rigging happened to fix it. Let me know if you guys can hear it this time, okay? Third time's the charm. I've got it all set up. It should show up. Let's try playing it. It should have sound this time. All right, so I played that little tiny bit. Can you guys hear it this time? Third time's the charm. Can you guys hear it? I know I'm quiet, but I've got to wait for the chat to let me know. Still can't hear it. Are you kidding me? Why the heck would it not show up with the sound? That is so strange. I have it all set up so that it should. Like, I have it set up, definitely. It's on. It says you have to use Chrome. It's on Chrome. Let's see. Last time, this is no longer full screen, so you guys can see all of my weird, like, bookmarks up here from years ago. I mean, we can try to do closed captioning if you guys want. Sound mixer, no, it's still coming through my headphones, so it should still go through. We can try doing closed captioning. If you guys can't hear it, then I guess it'll have to go that way. For those of you who are watching on the playback, I guess this is one that you're going to have to watch and not just, and not just podcast. All right, let's try one last time. If you guys can't hear it, I apologize. I did everything I possibly could. I have no idea what I can do to fix it at this point, because I've definitely got Chrome running. I've definitely got it streaming Chrome. I don't know why it's doing that. I don't know what else I can do to fix it. So, all right, we've got closed captioning up. I will let it stop at the place that I was talking about, and we'll talk about the difficulties of having this conversation in the first place. Okay, so this is another issue that I'm going to take, because this is kind of the crux of his argument. The Viking he's got up here, with, or rather the Nazi he's got with the so-called stereotypical Viking helmet. This is a major, major, major misconception that a lot of people have about paganism overall. First off, let's actually try our best to kind of define paganism, or rather to define pagan, because paganism is itself a little bit of a misnomer. It's a term of exclusion. Paganism basically means non-Abrahamic. That's effectively what it means. That's all it is. So when you're talking about paganism, it is the term originally that was used in the Middle Ages for any particular belief structure that was not Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. Period. Like, it means non-Abrahamic. And I'm using the term Abrahamic here specifically to mean all of the faiths that in some way, shape, or form spawned off of the Torah. All three of those like major world religions came from that one particular text in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, some of the others have other texts. I'm not blaming Jewish people in any way, shape, or form for the existence of other faiths and the things that they do or do not do. Jewish people in general, in my experience, actually tend to be a lot more accepting of people of other beliefs that are not theirs. Not all of them, but the majority of the ones that I've met have been, versus most Christians that I've met and require some kind of conversion. And I haven't had the opportunity to talk to a lot of Muslims that are not Sikhs, so I can't really speak too much to Islam. So, that said, when you're talking about what a pagan is, he expresses some confusion coming up as to, like, all of the different forms of paganism. But the thing is, there's no claim by any of us that we are all practicing the same faith. There isn't some sort of, oh, hey, Beafeld, Wind in the World Tree in my chat. If I take the headphones out, guys, you will be able to hear yourselves, unfortunately. I would have to mute my computer and then no sound would come anyway. So that wouldn't necessarily be the best thing if I were to do that. So coming back to what paganism is. When you were talking about paganism, the only way you can define a pagan in the modern day is through self-identification. So when you're talking about pagans, people in my chat, if you are or consider yourself a pagan, sound off with what religion you practice. Let's go ahead and show all of the folks from his audience. If you are watching this on the playback, live chat will be available. I won't be editing out all the tech issues at the beginning. I will make a note in the description as to what time the actual critique starts. But sound off really quick in the live chat as to what specific religion you practice. So, and if you're an eclectic, just say you're an eclectic. If you're a Wiccan, say you're a Wiccan. If you're multi-traditionalist, list your traditions. Like, make a note that you're a multi-traditionalist, list your traditions. You don't have to just pick one if you practice multiple. So far, just off of right now, I see Irish polytheism, I see heathenry, syncretic Celtic and heathenry, Norse heathenry, I see Fernsidu, I think is how you pronounce it. That would be Beafeld, which is a different form of paganism from a similar pantheon to the Norse as the Anglo-Saxon pantheon. Druidry, Hellenism, lots of Hellenists, of course. I'm a Hellenist YouTuber. We're going to have a lot of those in the chat. Lots and lots of heathens, eclectics, multi-traditionalist, North heathenry, and eclectic Christopaganism. Still seeking, seekers for folks who don't know, Gaulish Celt, so animist druid. So we have a pretty wide variety just here, like just in this live chat right now, the 102 of you that are here, just the people that chose to answer that question even. There's a Discordian up there. Hindus, Religio Romana, Shinto, which, you know, most people who practice Shinto don't consider that pagan, but so when you're talking about self-identification, when you're talking about a term that doesn't have a firm definition and primarily relies on self-identification, and if you want to know why that is, I did a video called What is a Pagan? You're Probably Wrong. You can take a look at that. That'll give you an idea of why we have such a broad, like, spectrum of people. You're going to get a mix of people and a mix of motivations. So the opening premise he has here, where he specifically goes after pagans right off the bat and says that people are specifically choosing their identity based off of groupthink and contrarianism, is flawed as a premise from the start. Because, yeah, I'm not going to deny the fact that there are a number of folkists who have become, and again, folkists, let me get a no xenia for xenophobes and no frith for folkists in the live chat, please. Folkists are people who believe that your blood in some way determines what religion you can practice. If you want a significant, like any more, there's a much more detailed definition that Ocean Keltoy and I actually coined together with Wolf the Red and a few other folks who helped us work on it. Basically, they think that perceived ancestral ties in some way give you benefit or privilege or somehow restrict what religion you can practice. And the problem with that belief is it does attract a lot of the alt-right and of, you know, neo-nasties, for lack of a better way to put it. We don't tend to accept them into our communities overall. They have their own a lot of the time. Some of them were attracted for that reason. Some of them were brought into their faiths due to mistaken understandings of how ancient practices are. You can't say whether or not they genuinely believe in their gods or whether or not we do. You have no way to know apart from what I tell you what I believe. But I can tell you that I wouldn't have an entire ritual room in my house that is devoted exclusively to practice of the gods, and I wouldn't be in the process of building a giant shrine in my backyard that's probably going to piss my neighbors off and potentially put me at risk for vandalism if I didn't genuinely believe in the gods. I wouldn't have made this YouTube channel and refused to create a Patreon until my Discord rioted if I didn't believe in my gods. Right? So in terms of people's reasoning, trying to state out of the bat, even if you're just making the mistake believing, and trust me, he seems to think that there's another motivation as well. For those of you who answered eclectic, Wiccan, or witch, boy, do I have a surprise for you in a minute. His belief even that the folkists are literally only getting into this for contrarianism actually deeply misses some of the major motivations, even for getting into something as misguided as folkism. I have repeatedly called for some level of compassion with folkists that are very early in their journey, because a lot of them need to feel special in some way. A lot of them are vulnerable and they come from bad places. And that doesn't mean that we should honor their ideas in any way, shape, or form. But it does mean that when we combat their ideas, we don't have to insult them as people. And I feel like this video is opening up with that argument, period. You can respect the person without believing in their ideas or respecting their ideas or even putting up with their occupation of your space if they're going to do abusive things. So, with that in mind, let's continue. Okay, converting from atheism for political reasons. Pagans in my chat. Let's get a quick show of hands. How many of you converted, quote unquote, and I'm going to use this term converted lightly because most of us don't consider transitioning to paganism to be a conversion. A lot of us consider it to be a call. How many of you converted from atheism specifically for political reasons? Can I get a sound off? G in the chat if you didn't. H in the chat if you did. Specifically have to have converted from atheism for political reasons. You don't have to specify what they are. So let's see what happens in the chat really quick. So let's see. I'm seeing a lot of G's. I don't think I've seen. Have I seen a single H yet? Do we have any? Do we have any H? We have one H in the entire chat. Do we have one? We've got one H in the entire chat. I'm looking. Yeah, we don't get a lot of G's this often in the chat. So yeah, there's that's a lot. That is absolutely a lot. The chat is very G. We've got two H's. Okay, that both of those H's, I see two H's. To like at least one of them is the same person. Shay, that I don't see three H's. I see Rillavid, it looks like put H twice, but I'm not seeing a third. Oh, there we go, Stel. So we've got three H's. We've got Stel, we've got Rillavid, and we've got Rilla. All right, so how many G's do we have? Does somebody actually want to go through all the trouble of counting it, or should we just kind of take this as at least a semi-representative sample, considering, hi, I'm a communist, and my channel is very much... We have a pretty heavy mix of different people from various political beliefs, generally not neo-Nazis, because I don't put up with folkists in my chat, but this is a pretty wide spectrum of political beliefs. Some of them lean left. I frequently get raided by Nazis, and we're not really seeing pagans who converted for political reasons. If you guys want to discuss in the comments, for those of you who are watching this on the playback, what your reasons for converting or for leaving were, you're welcome to. But let's go ahead and ask another question. Give me an H in the chat if the reason that you started practicing a pagan faith was because of some sort of divine experience that you had. Let's go ahead and let the chat respond. And for the sake of JACandQuill, I will start reading with the chat as I go. I'm going to try to start reading the subtitles. I have to mute the video on my end so that I don't get confused by the voice and my own voice repeating that. I would say that, yeah, Akeda says about 50 Gs. Child of Nick says 48. So between 48 and 50 Gs to 3 Hs out of everybody, versus looking at the Hs now for, like, converting for a divine experience. Again, the word convert here is very loose. It looks like most of us didn't necessarily deal with arguments. We dealt with a personal experience of some kind. So... again, when it comes to political things, it doesn't look like we are dealing with the majority of at least my pagan audience, which, you know, there's 104 people here. I'm pretty sure if somebody agreed with what he was saying, they would have piped up by now. I'm pretty sure that most of the people here seem to have decided to start practicing because of an experience they had that they couldn't explain as anything other than divine, from the gods that they now interact with. Would that be fair to say, chat? So let's, Shay says the gods throwing paper balls at people's heads until they listen. Yeah, absolutely. But let's go ahead. We've got logic. Okay, so here's a huge refutation of what this guy just said. I kind of logic myself from atheism to paganism rather than a political thing or a divine experience. So this guy's saying that, like, the JustTheFacts is saying that people don't tend to consider the reasoning and come to their own conclusion. Rather, it's just groupthink and contrarianism. Well, clearly, there's at least one person in this chat that specifically felt like they arrived there through logic. And actually, my buddy Ocean Keltoy talks a little bit about how that was part of how he got to his place in his pagan journey, was through considering the logic of a single god versus many. So in that alone, this already just does not make sense. So let's go ahead and continue. Again, I'm sorry that the sound isn't working. I'm going to try to read out what it says. It says, since atheism is not a religion, but a lack of a religion, it doesn't validate any particular belief system, and that's not good for people that need to be 100% politics 100% of the time. Through this video, oops, this is part of the reason why I have to back it up. Through this video, we'll look at people who have done this on the left, on the right, and then we'll talk about why all of this matters. If any of this sounds interesting to you, blah, 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 all of the YouTube stuff. So he's like, here's a sort of interesting panel here. The screen says, you're leaving atheism, but we kicked out all the rightoids. I'm sorry, but you don't even have an aesthetic. And it's showing this, like, kind of crappy cartoon with somebody who's got a yerba mate and a collar that says witch. So, yeah. Witchcraft and paganism are not the same thing. Some witches consider themselves pagans. Most pagans don't consider themselves witches. Not all Wiccans even consider themselves witches. Not all pagans believe in magic and practice it. This is a horrible straw man that they're trying to erect, not only against the witchcraft community, like with this person just sort of being in there like for the aesthetic, but it also does a disservice to the folk traditions that a lot of modern and even older witchcraft practices were based on. Now, that's not to say that modern witchcraft practices all have their root in folk traditions. They don't. I'm not a witch. I don't practice magic. I used to when I was way younger, but that's not to say that all of it has any basis in what's ancient, but that's also completely ignoring the fact that these things have been around for as long as they have. Appalachian folk magic, for example, has been around for hundreds of years. You know, the ancient Greeks practiced magic throughout all of the Hellenistic era. Heka, it was a core part of Kemetic religion for thousands of years. So, yeah, there's no reason to believe whatsoever that people getting involved in witchcraft are just doing so for the aesthetic. There might be some small percentage of the population that is, in the same way that there is a percentage of the population of folkists that are, just in the same way that there is a percentage of the population of pagans that are folkists. But that's nowhere close to the majority at all. As somebody who could be considered at least a partial leader in the pagan community, like that's not the case at all. Especially considering how much political fighting we see in the pagan community. Like, if it were all about the aesthetics and about politics, you'd think that there'd be a lot more groupthink and a lot less, for lack of a better way to put it, infighting. So let's go ahead and keep going. It's been, for the most part, it's been the right wing that's departed atheism online, allowing leftists to make atheism all about them. But it's worth noting that how some leftists have tried to create a religion from almost nothing. Most of this is contrarianism against Christianity, which is associated with the right in America. And what could possibly be more contrary to Christianity than witches? Okay, so this is where we get to the contrarianism thing. I agree that some pagans do take a pit stop in Wicca for at least some amount of time out of contrarianism. Not a majority by any means, but it is something that some people do. In fact, there's a lot of very turfy subsets, one of the big ones being Dianic Wicca, that come from people being so traumatized by their experiences within Christianity that they reject the entire concept of male gods completely, and of the concept of anything other than biological gender, quite often with it. Not all Dianics are like that, but a lot of them are. That is a thing that does happen. But the thing is, most people that are like that either don't stick with it, or they grow and evolve over time. Yeah, Sea Dragon brings up a point. Should I tell him that Christian witches exist? I know several. Yeah, we've got a few Christopagans. We've got at least one Christopagan in this chat currently. I know that there's at least two that are in the server. And that's the thing, is there are people who syncretize witchcraft and Christianity. In fact, there are many Unitarians that I've met that do that, and some Episcopalians that I've met believe that magic can be possible and syncretize magic and Christianity. There are things like Dutch powwow that syncretize magic and Christianity. So when you're talking about these traditions, again, you're claiming knowledge of people's motivations without fully understanding the community which you are criticizing. Contrarianism for the left, quote unquote, like let's try to take this logic a little further. He's claiming that atheism has been taken over by the left, which, I mean, I don't know how many of the right-wing skeptic community you've seen and how they've kind of transitioned to form a lot of the alt-right online, but like that's neither here nor there. You know, he probably knows his community better than I do. Let's talk a little bit. If atheism has been taken over by the left, then why is it that he's criticizing left-wing witches here and not assuming that all pagans have become folkist heathens? specifically, or folkist, insert religion here. Because if atheism has been taken over by the left, why would they then feel the need to convert to paganism? Wouldn't atheism suffice? Like, his earlier logic claiming that, you know, atheism doesn't suit people who need to be 100% political all the time, again, probably don't watch very many atheist YouTubers or atheist content creators in general, because in order to survive as an atheist content creator, you eventually do need to start making political content. This is just something that I've seen over and over again, because there's only so much debunking of individual religious ideas that you even can, like, exist. So, yeah, there's only so many ideas within Christianity, especially, that you can debunk before you start running out of material or getting repetitive or boring your audience. Like, no matter how incredible your personality is, you're eventually going to have to start talking about politics. In part because Christianity has embedded itself so deeply in politics in most countries, not just the US, but in most countries. So, again, when you're talking about this, it's... I don't even know how to address this point in a way that doesn't make me sound like I'm just being angry for no reason, because I'm not. It's just that his logic doesn't even add up within the structure of the arguments he's presented so far in the video. So let's see if it gets any better. It also has the bonus effect of being against the patriarch and women only. Okay, so let me get a sound off. How many of the witches in my chat identify as men? Give me an H if you are a witch, if you identify as a witch, and also identify as a man. Give me a G in the chat if you identify as a witch, but do not identify as a man. We'll get a survey to see if there is even one person who identifies as a man in this chat who also identifies as a witch. Guess what? That this point is not true. JACandQuill maybe considers themselves to be no men allowed whatsoever. Apart from that, yeah, it doesn't look like... Yeah, we've got 2, 3 H's at least, 4, 5, 6 H's I'm counting. So yeah, clearly... so let me go ahead and do another thing. For those of you who identify as witches, give me an F in the chat to pay respects for this guy's mistakes if you believe that men and people who identify as, like, all people who identify as men, or people who would be identified as men by society but may be non-binary, if you believe that they can be practicing witches. If you believe that people other than those who identify as women can be practicing witches. So give me an F in the chat if that is a belief of yours. Again, we are talking to the pagan community right now, who defines who we are. Yeah, this chat is currently paying a lot of respects. So apologies if the phrasing was a little bit awkward there, but I know that when you're talking about gender things and religion, things can get a little bit hazy because some people are sex fundamentalists, for example, and think that, well, you know, even if you were, you know, identify as non-binary but would be identified as a man, that you're still count as that, and blah 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 blah. So I wanted to make sure that I was going through a ton of stuff to make sure that I was covering all of the different instances in which somebody could point out, like, you know, that suddenly that person can't practice. So let me get one more round since we're done with the F's. Let's go ahead and do again, we're just talking to people who identify as witches. Let's do a G if you believe that gender identity has something to do with witchcraft and who can and cannot practice it, and an H if you believe that it has nothing to do with witchcraft and who can and cannot practice it. So G if you believe that that witchcraft should in some way be limited by gender. H if you believe that gender identity has nothing to do with witchcraft. That is a That is a very H chat, guys, already. That was absolutely rapidly fast. So, the whole and women only point still doesn't make sense. So how do we actually get the magic powers, though? I don't know, but I quit the ones, but I made a quilt like the ones on Tumblr, so I'm a witch now. Ugh. Tumblr witchcraft and is a whole cesspool in of itself. If your idea of what witchcraft is comes from Tumblr and Reddit, then I hate to say this to you, but you're highly, highly undereducated. You know nothing about our community. I saw 2 G's for folks who believe that gender has something to do with what is possible in terms of who can practice witchcraft and who can't. That's interesting. So, yeah, how do we get the, like, Victoria has a good point. How do we get the white supremacist, feminist, anti-patriarchy types in the same group? Seems contradictory. Well, I mean, there are folkists who identify as heathens, and then there are people who will not let folkists in their groups. Like, are they still heathens? Well, I don't know. Like, clearly folkists don't believe in heathenry as the folks in my community would practice it, but do we get to say that they are not themselves heathens? That has to do with how you define what heathenry is. If they call themselves heathens and the folks who reject folkism call themselves heathens, then the lay person, how are they to tell the difference? Apart from, the swastikas and other, like, the winged Othala runes and other things that mark out the folkists and their shitty beliefs, for the average person, they might not know the difference between the two and think that all heathens are like the folkists because the folkists are rather loud. So, yeah, there's a good point here, Spoopy. I think that the reason that many people think only witches can be women is due to the media's depiction of witches. Absolutely. That is a big mistake. But the thing is he used the word pagan before witches, and he uses it later. So I'm talking about paganism in general and not just witchcraft, even though witchcraft is not even my personal community. I consider myself a Hellenist, have been for the past 5 years or so. And yeah, I can't speak for the witchcraft community. I used to be a part of it. I don't consider myself a part of it anymore, but I do consider witches to be a part of the wider pagan community for those that identify as such. And as such, I'm going to defend against this bullshit because, well, as I say at the end of every video, we're stronger together. Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute, Victoria. Trust me, it gets worse. So let's dig a little bit deeper. So people on Tumblr decided to become witches as if there were any sort of witch canon or organization qualified to certify them as witches. And eventually, the phenomenon spread to Reddit, resulted in Witches v. Patriarchy, a very fun subreddit to add to the pile thereof. So, yeah. I'm just going to kind of let that sink in for a minute. This guy is, as he puts it, a tradcath, a traditional Catholic. He has a video on his channel saying that the new pope is a servant of the devil. So I'm assuming that he's not fond of the new pope and some of the changes that have been being made at the Vatican. That doesn't seem like much of an assumption with a definition the way that he does with the content in that video. But coming back to his statement here, this is the difference between an orthodoxic and an orthopraxic religion. When you are talking about orthodoxic religions, and Christianity is an orthodoxic religion, we're talking Greek now, lie, ortho, right, doxa. Doxa means belief, as opposed to praxis, or practice. So when you're talking about pagan practice, there is what is considered right practice. Now, most witchcraft is eclectic. There are traditions of witchcraft, and clearly this person has also never heard of covens, because if you want to be part of a particular tradition, there are some you can only initiate into closed traditions through covens. But one of the big differences between orthodoxic and orthopraxic religions is that orthopraxic religions largely tend to have elements of eclecticism in them, and they also have a tendency not to have centralized priesthoods that dictate what is and is not a part of the religion. Some of them still do. Some living traditions still do. Some of them still have texts upon which things are based. But the majority of orthopraxic traditions, there's a variance among practice. In fact, the majority of ancient orthopraxic traditions that are being revived by modern pagans, there is a massive variance in practice. As I mentioned before, being a witch or being a pagan is largely about self-identification by its very nature. Just because a religion is not organized does not mean that it is not valid. This is him applying his worldview through the lens of Catholicism to other religions in an attempt to invalidate their existence because they don't conform to his idea of what a religion should be. That said, in ancient times, even when there were still temples and priesthoods, etc., even if you were a part of those faiths in ancient times, you grew up in those places, there still was variance even between city-states within the same cultures. Athens and Sparta honored different gods in different ways, and some gods were only honored in specific places. To attempt to talk about something as broad as witchcraft, as though you would need a hierarchical structure for it to be valid. Now, keep in mind, we are 2 minutes into a 10-minute video, and I am almost an hour into this video, like, responding to it. This is how uneducated this person is on what paganism is. To attempt to apply that particular yardstick, you're not just comparing apples to oranges, you're comparing an apple to the poster on my wall. Paganism is an umbrella term for a lot of very not similar things. And it is an umbrella term that was applied by Christians to people who may not have accepted that term. Again, watch my video on what a pagan is for a little more elucidation on the history in that. But also, ancient Christianity was not unified. And as much as the Catholic Church wants to say that they were the first church, there's not a lot of evidence for that. There's a lot of evidence that they gained a lot of power, but the first church would arguably have been the one that Paul got into a fight with from the original apostles, and it would have largely been made up of by ancient Jewish people, because Christianity was originally a messianic Jewish cult, specifically like a doomsday cult. And I'm using the term cult here not as an insult to the fledgling religion, but in the actual academic sense of a specific set of practices done by a specific subset of people. You know, Sharam here says, even among modern-day Hindus, there's plenty of variation between every region, and those are quite different between those and the Reform orgs. I mean, there are also differences even in canon between whether, like, there are polytheistic Hindus, there are monotheistic Hindus, there are atheopagan Hindus, for lack of a better way to put it. Atheopagan here just being the broad term. So, like, even within faiths, there is variation, and always has been. Yeah, I'm not forgetting the Gnostics, trust me. So, yeah, this is where we're at when we're having this conversation. It is so nuanced that it took me almost an hour just to talk about the first 2 minutes of this video, and we're barely in. Now, you might say, oh, these people don't actually believe in witchcraft. They're just in it for the politics and the aesthetic. And judging by the most upvoted posts on these subreddits, you have a compelling argument. Another part of it is how cool these beliefs are. They promise magical powers and real fairies existing in the world, and Christianity doesn't do that, for the most part. But we often become what we pretend to be and believe what we want to believe. It's fair to say that there are a decent number of people on the internet who really believe that the ancient ways of witchcraft actually work. These people have surrendered their reason and their own identity to group mentality and what they think is cool. Okay. So, yeah. Groupthink among witches. Ha! Have you ever hung out in a group of witches in an actual pagan space, not just a specific subreddit that was designed to like talk about a specific topic in a very specific way. Have you hung out in my Discord server? Gods forbid. Pagans fight with each other all the time about everything. The furthest thing from groupthink, the majority of pagan traditions, like, you might be able to make that argument about folkism, because folkism has hierarchy at its base, something that you as a Catholic, JustTheFacts, would be very familiar with. But if you hang around pagans, we will fight tooth and nail over the translation of an obscure text from ancient Egypt for hours. We will fight tooth and nail over whether or not a particular deity is dangerous to worship. We will fight tooth and nail over the most inconsequential actual things. We have a fight between us currently that I have had to attempt to make many, many videos to address about whether or not you actually have to believe in the gods to consider yourself a pagan. I don't understand how you can possibly say that you surrendered yourself exclusively to groupthink when pagans are some of the most diverse, and for lack of a better way to put it, I love my entire audience. I'm not insulting any of my pagan audience here, but I am going to implicate myself. We are some of the most stubborn and argumentative lot you will ever freaking meet. Ever. And witches even more so, because witchcraft overall, as I said, is very eclectic. So one person might think that black olives are going to end your life if you happen to combine them in a particular essential oil of lemongrass to attempt to, say, summon money magic. There is so much argument in the witchcraft community between whether or not any gray magic, aka magic that is specifically for a specific task or to accomplish a specific goal, whether or not any of that can ever be ethical, because you never actually know the path that it took, and there's no amount of phrasing in a spell that you could possibly do to ensure that nobody will ever get hurt. There are fights about whether or not magic specifically to hurt somebody or even to protect yourself is ethical. That is on the macro level. On the micro level, you're going to get into arguments over whether or not specific ingredients actually represent what they are. And that's not even talking about the arguments over cultural appropriation or over occultism and eclecticism and personal experiences. Literally, you talk to 100 different witches and you ask them the same question and you'll get at least 70 different answers. And the 30 who agree probably don't all agree with each other. Right? Like, this is something, when you are talking about witchcraft, groupthink is the furthest thing you can get. Maybe, again, at the very, 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 very beginning of somebody's journey within witchcraft. But if that person is serious, if they stick for more than just a few months, they're going to branch off a Tumblr. And they're going to discover the depth and complexity of arguments. And again, that's not even talking about the argument that frequently happens between eclectics and Reconstructionists, because there are Reconstructionist witches, there are Reconstructionists who practice witchcraft, there are Reconstructionists who do not consider themselves witches but practice magic, and there are Reconstructionists that think that magic is evil. I am not one of those. But even if you don't even have the basic vocabulary to understand the differences between these different things, and again, we're still ignoring all of the different witchcraft traditions. A Dianic is going to disagree severely with an Alexandrian about whether or not men can even enter as witches, as we discussed earlier. So when you are talking about these topics, there is so much nuance in this that trying to generalize, and by the way, Liber Lilith, from all the demonolators, yes, they are a separate group. Demonolators in my Discord server fucking hate that book. Most of them do. Apparently there's a lot of really bad shit in it. I've never read it myself, but the fact that he referenced that is a big red flag IMO. Yeah, I'm gonna say that I don't endorse that book. But there are people who swear by it. Again, the occult and witchcraft communities are extraordinarily varied, and I'm not even part of either of them. I don't consider myself to be a part of either of them. I know a lot about both, because I used to be. But this is a Reconstructionist who, usually we get into a fight with those people a lot. You guys have probably seen me get into fights with folks from the occult and from the witchcraft community on my Discord server. Usually, that's a fight waiting to happen, and here I am defending these folks because this guy gets it so fucking wrong, which is why I really want to believe this guy's so sheltered in his Catholic world that he doesn't understand anything about paganism. Although, for all I know, these magic spells work, I'm still only midway through the Liber Lilith, and I've yet to try out any of its dark magic rituals. Who else has done that? Modern neo-pagans. Most of these guys, apart from a few anti-Christian lefty oddballs, came from the neo-Nazi movement, which was actually rather popular online around 2013 or so. So, yeah, we're back to, okay, you're now claiming that neo-pagan means folkist. Neo-pagan and folkist do not mean the same thing. Neo-pagan's not an insult either. Neo-pagan just simply means new pagan. Newsflash, the majority of people in my chat right now that identify as pagans are neo-pagans. Some people are practicing living traditions, but most of us, even those of us who reconstruct, are neo-pagans. Can I get a G in the chat if you're a folkist, and an H in the chat if you are not? Because y'all just got called Nazis. So let's go ahead and sound off the chat really quick. G in the chat if you're a folkist, H in the chat if you're not. For those of you, by the way, that are channel members, you have the No Xenia for Xenophobes emote, I believe. Yeah, if anybody answers G even as a joke, my mods are on standby. Just so you guys know. Yeah, like right here it says, Jesus saves, in the name of Odin, I reject this Jewish filth. I'm going to break this guy's brain for a minute. There are Jewish people in my server who are also syncretic pagans. This is a thing. There is also a lot of occult appropriation of Jewish traditions that is frequently complained about by the Jewish community. This is a thing that happens. Fuck folkism. Can I get an F in the chat for fuck folkism? JACOLanny, I have an entire video if you want to check out as to what folkism is. The longer definition is the belief that ancestral ties in some way grant privilege or access to a tradition, religious tradition, particularly those that are no longer living traditions. Fuck folkism. Folkism is effectively racist paganism. Now, there are racists who are not folkists within paganism, but racist paganism specifically is folkism. And his claim that the majority of pagans are folkists does not hold up in most of the communities that I have run in. In fact, that's why we have things like Declaration 127 and the Xenia Declaration and the more recent Declaration of Deeds that wonderful Beafeld has been running. Like, heathens in my chat, y'all sounded off earlier. Can you guys give me a quick round of what your opinion on folkist heathenry is? Because the vast majority of the folks that I have met within the heathen community do not identify with folkists. They don't identify with neo-Nazis. They do not identify with these horrible people. Most of us will not practice with them. The majority of us will not share space with them. We're not a few lefty weirdos. In fact, quite a few of the folks in my server, there are a number of folks that do consider themselves conservatives and have gotten into fights with people on my server. There are some that consider themselves centrist. There are some that don't concern themselves with politics hardly at all. There are large swaths of my server that never participate in the political section of it. Why? Because we have a pretty wide variety of people in our spaces. We're pretty diverse. Groupthink is not one of those things that you can accuse us of. And as Scove tried to write, if you stand for hate, you stand alone. This may be shocking, but these people didn't actually like Jews that much, and upon figuring out that Christianity was a continuation of Judaism, they decided to go as far away from it as possible and embrace the old gods. That's... I mean, for some folkists that might be true, but I've even met folkists that got into folkism just because they didn't fully understand that blood and belief have nothing to do with each other. That blood and practice have nothing to do with each other. Like, seriously. That's about it right there. There's a small percentage of folkist pagans maybe that had that motivation, but generalizing it to all of us is, again, not even helpful. There's not even a large enough percentage of us to generalize that to all of us. Not even a large enough percentage of us are heathens to generalize that to all of us. And I mean, if you ever, like, no offense, but if you ever want to deal with right-wing magic practitioners, go check out the occult community. There's a lot of people on the left-hand path, especially, that very much are far on the right wing and practice magic. Our community is not that, for lack of a better way to put it, homogenous. We're just not. We never would be. By the very nature, orthopraxic traditions are more concerned with what you do than what you think. Does that mean that those of us who disagree with the Nazis are going to hang out with them? No. Obviously we won't. Because, well, like, if you're a heinous human being, I don't want to be around you. But whether or not they get to call themselves pagan, pagan's a self-identification. They're not a large enough percentage to accuse us all of having that as the motivation, though. But also the Hindu gods, and also embracing a view where it's all figurative and there aren't any real gods per se, but it's a metaphor for reincarnation. If you can't tell, this is somewhat tangled. Efforts to create a new European religion for post-Christianity have been going on since the 1800s, and they've always been somewhat tangled between Norse paganism, Roman paganism, Hinduism, and more. Okay. So, first off, for the Hindus in the chat, you guys know a lot more about this than I do, but last I checked, Hinduism is a living tradition that has had continuation since long before the 1800s, that has its roots in the place in which it is still primarily practiced, and has nothing to do with creating a pan-European religion in any way, shape, or form. Roman pagans, Hellenist pagans, Greek pagans, Norse pagans, we all have different beliefs. Not a single one of us will claim, or at least the majority of us, not a single one of us in this chat, I'm pretty sure, will claim that we're right and that we're trying to create some sort of like pan-European religion. Most of us just practice for ourselves. But I have another major criticism for this portion of the video. Because there's one concept that kind of breaks it, and that's the broom closet. If we were all doing this for attention, then why are so many of us afraid to come out? Why did Bayefeld and I do this incredibly long stream of people sharing their stories about all of the, some of the positive, but a whole truckload of negative experiences for people when friends and family found out who they were? Why is the broom closet such a pervasive problem if we're all doing this for attention and groupthink? And for as big as the alt-right is, and for as big as the left supposedly is thought to be, why are there not more of us? If it's all political, if people are just doing this for groupthink, why are there not more pagans? Why is it not more socially widely seen? Why are there so many traditions? Why do we fight each other so much? Why is the broom closet a thing? Why do atheists attack us so hard? Specifically anti-theist atheists, not all atheists. There are atheist allies in this chat, I know. Why do we have to be so afraid if this is groupthink and aesthetic and nothing else? Why are people still calling to have us burned and executed in large parts of the world? Why is there so much violence against us? Why did that shop in the other town that Bayefeld talked about get bricks thrown through its window until it was driven out of business? Not from lack of business, but from vandalism and the inability to insure itself. Why? For all of us here that have had this discussion, that have been talking about the future of other faiths, why is it that atheists and pagans face some of the same discrimination? If it's all political, yet you're claiming that atheists are primarily on the left, but right-wing atheists attack my channel pretty regularly. We get raided by them regularly. We get raided by folkists regularly. If there's so much groupthink, then why did I have Nazis in my chat when I was talking about my gender fluid identity? Why did my mods have to combat a huge slew of neo-Nazis that wanted to attack me? If there's so much groupthink, why is it that we have so many leaders that are more left or even center or don't discuss politics at all that get attacked by those who do? If there's so much fucking groupthink involved in conversion, why is it that we don't just see two factions? Because it's not just two factions. It's not. Clearly, our relationships with the gods must be about something other than politics. Maybe, I don't know. This is probably the most shocking thing you guys are hearing me. Are you guys ready? Are you braced? Are the electrified sporks charged? Are you guys ready for the greatest shock of your lives? Maybe, just maybe, to pagans, our beliefs are about building a relationship with the gods. Maybe our relationships with the gods are about building relationships with the gods. Maybe it's about the gods. Maybe many of us actually came to our current beliefs because of experiences we had with the gods. Now, I know that to some Christians who don't believe that there are any other gods at all, or who believe that they're somehow demons or something, I know that that's a thing that you probably can't think about. And I'm not going to ask you to accept that other gods exist. What I'm asking you to accept is that maybe most of the people in my chat here that call themselves pagans actually do believe that they do. And that even the atheo-pagans who don't, who just get use out of the praxis, that they have a valid form of religion too. That maybe their practice has nothing to do with like politics and everything to do with the psychological benefit they get from that practice. Maybe religion itself doesn't just mean Christianity. Victoria, unfortunately, I lost your super chat somehow in the actual like live chat thing that I have here in my program. So if you can retype what you wrote, I would love to read your super chat. But unfortunately, at present, I don't have access to it because it seems to have gotten lost. So let me know where it went, like retype it and I will read it for you. It's not, yeah, tag me so I can actually see it, and I can actually read it. Our current beliefs are quite shocking. Aha, JACandQuill. That is an Akeda pun if ever I've heard one. Pun go burr. So, back then, as now, intellectuals decided they didn't like the principles of mercy, humility, and the meek inheriting the earth, preferring glorious conquest instead. They also didn't like the Jews very much. Now, there's a limited extent to which this is admirable. These people looked at a tradition that's thousands of years old in the eyes and decided on their own intellect after critically thinking it through, whether or not they'd like to follow it, and anyone who does that has my respect, whether they end up being a Christian or a pagan or how have you. But then we arrive at a simple question. Why be pagan and not atheist? Why not just reject this tradition on its own and then go on without it? Well, that's simple. Atheism was highly associated with liberal academics, and that's not what they wanted. And it's basically the same today. The neo-Nazis didn't want to be associated with people that you think of when you think of atheism. So, let's go ahead and turn that around. Now, let's see if I can find the tag first before I address what I just read. Let's see if I can find the tag from Victoria, if you can retype it. Yeah, he had Nietzsche on the screen. That's kind of hilarious. But yeah, it says the Catholic. I kind of agree. Christianity isn't the default, also, depends on where you're born. But on top of that, let's go ahead and talk about why not be atheist. Maybe because we believe in the gods. Have you stopped to consider that maybe we believe in the gods? Maybe we've had experiences with the gods. Maybe we have reason to believe in the gods. Maybe pagans actually believe what we say we do. Or maybe atheopagans find some kind of psychological benefit for those who are atheopagan in pagan practice. Maybe. Maybe people practice magic because they think it works. It's such a revolutionary idea, isn't it? Maybe Christianity isn't the only belief system that exists. Maybe some people are trying to, in some way, recover their heritage. Maybe they've had divine experience with a god that has nothing to do with their heritage. Maybe it's essential to their culture. Maybe they grew up in a religion that has nothing to do with Christianity or atheism or Islam or Judaism. They're not the only options. Maybe we actually believe in the gods. All right, Victoria says, 2 types. Became pagan because religion is required, discovered it wasn't, so became atheist, or became atheist because screw structure, then could hear a call and became pagan. Yeah, Poe actually has a good point. It must be exhausting having so little trust in people. If I had to listen to others and then fabricate something new every time people talk to me, I'd never speak to anyone again. I think Christians have a really hard time believing that we could possibly have the level of experience with our deities that we do because of the fact that Christianity itself tends to exclude that kind of direct experience to any, again, mostly evangelical Christianity, but from anybody other than either a select few in the priesthood or a specific prophet or only the prophets that wrote the Bible. That's my experience. Christians get gaslit about their experiences with their own deity to the point where they don't believe anybody else could have any experience with theirs. Those are those that actually accept that the deities exist in some other form. There are also those that have been brainwashed into thinking that there are no other deities, and I'm going to use the term brainwashing here because, unfortunately, most of the beliefs that come with that particular set of beliefs don't make sense together. And the Bible itself is polytheistic. Go ahead and watch my video on that if you want to. I've done a ton of historical research on these topics. I've covered, my Christians Are Weird playlist covers a lot of sort of paganism 101 for Christians and ways in which Christians don't fully understand their own book. When it comes to these things, it is a lot easier for you to believe that, for example, somebody's faking than it is that, for example, a non-hierarchical relationship-based religion could exist. Because when you live in one of the most hierarchical Christian structures as a Catholic, it's going to be a lot easier to think that maybe they all did it because of conformity, because conformity is also really big in Catholicism. That maybe they did it for community, because community is really big in Catholicism. Trust me, if you become a pagan for community, you're going to be a very lonely person. Because as wonderful as our online communities are, real life communities can be extremely difficult to find depending on what particular religion you practice. And again, most of us exist in the broom closet. Most of us can't even open up about being pagan for fear of losing our jobs or our kids or worse. And atheists share the same problem. If all of us were faking not being Christians for clout and attention or for groupthink, then you'd think there'd be a lot more of us, for one thing. And for another, the consequences of being who we are would not be so fucking high. Because when you start to face the prospect of losing your children or your livelihood or your home over discrimination, then whether or not you actually believe becomes a much, much more important question. And contrary to what this guy thinks, there are major consequences for being a pagan or for being an atheist. In fact, pagans have to deal with anti-theists as well that treat us like we're Christians and like we believe the same things that they do. And again, I'm specifying evangelical judgmental Christians here. And we have to deal with abuse from two sides for those that aren't allies, who don't understand us, who don't know who we are. A large percentage of the world judges religions that are not Abrahamic as being dangerous, as being evil. If pagans really were like this, there wouldn't be such high fucking stakes for being pagan. So they went off to make their own thing, and they decided to believe, not based on what they thought was true, but based off of team mentality and contrarianism. Though later on, they managed to believe what they wanted to believe, and might I say, what a fine job they did of it. Okay, so I'm going to close out this the video because the rest of this, he does some interesting critiques of traditional Catholics and of Christians who ignore the Bible to push their own agenda for political reasons. But the problem here is that I, as a pagan, could cherry pick those examples in very hyper-religious, hyper-conservative subreddits and turn around and say, everybody that's a Christian is just LARPing to be a Christian because of groupthink and because of contrarianism with the atheist liberal elite. Because you can cherry pick examples off of Twitter or off of Reddit, etc., of Christians that are talking about how based it is to be Christian, how based family values are, how incredible and wonderful it is to be all of these things because of the evil, satanic, communist, feminazi left, and how they became Christians because of that. And you can find those examples and overgeneralize. You can do that. You can absolutely do that. But it is no more fair for me to turn around and do that than it is for him to claim that the majority of us, or in the video, all of us, all pagans, quote unquote converted and only became convinced because of groupthink. Because one of the things that I will tell you is, and I know this from my own experience, most pagans are constantly afraid that we're crazy. Most of us that have had divine experiences doubt ourselves. Some of my most popular videos are about figuring out if you've had a divine experience. Some of my most popular videos are about the nature of them, are about reassuring each other that we're actually valid in our beliefs, because the consequences for us believing what we do and practicing what we do are so high. We have events that we do as groups to try to ensure that we don't have to be afraid of those things, because of the fact that we constantly get the messaging from the outside world that there must be something wrong with us just for the sheer fact that we thought about something other than Christianity or one of the big three, or even atheists are treated often like they're crazy or like there's something wrong with them. Pagans and atheists, most of us do become hyper-political because of the persecution against us, because of the hate and the assumptions from people like JustTheFacts, from people who assume that there must be some ulterior motive other than a genuine belief in our traditions and our gods. Imposter syndrome is real. But many of us who are pagans are part of marginalized communities and are abused. And even those of us who aren't, a lot of us face constant discrimination. A lot of us have to fight tooth and nail for even basic recognition of our beliefs or of us as human beings. I don't have a hope's chance in hell of ever being able to adopt a kid because of the fact that I'm pagan. As badly as I want to, even though my reproductive system is effectively broken, I can't, because the majority of adoption agencies are run by mostly Catholics, and they won't adopt pagan couples because they think there's something wrong with us. So when people assume constantly that it must be mental illness, or it must be politics, or it must be literally anything other than who we are, Christians spent centuries trying to reclassify Plato out of being a polytheist, Aristotle out of being a polytheist, Socrates out of being a polytheist, even though they explicitly said they were. Christians have spent most of history trying to label us as anything other than what we are. And yet you have the gall, Just the Facts, to make the argument that we subscribe to groupthink for some sort of political motivation because it'll benefit us somehow? Because we want to be contrarians? Would you stay a contrarian if it could potentially cost you your life, your kids, your job? I don't think that that makes sense. I don't think that his logic even adds up. It sounds like the obsessive ramblings of somebody who is trying to get clickbait and trying to get an angry reaction, and I'm not going to give you that anger. I'm trying to give you education and understanding. Because it seems like you just don't know anything about us. Your criticism of Catholicism and your criticism of evangelical Christianity and the right was pretty spot on. There are a lot of people that do that. But you don't accuse your own community of being the majority that. Don't do that to mine. So, with that in mind, that was that video. It wasn't good, but those accusations of LARPing, if you guys needed arguments against them, the strongest argument is the broom closet and how many of us are stuck in it. Now, as for announcements and stuff, I do plan on trying to do another live stream next Saturday. I might be able to do one on Monday, depending on how long they take it, but most likely not, because hence why this one is today. If the rewiring doesn't keep my power off for the majority of the week, then I'm going to try to get a video out. I'm going to be delaying the politics in Hellenism video, not because of this one, but because of research complications I've been running into. I'm waiting for 2 books that are going to be arriving soon that I picked up that are specifically on this topic in Athens, and I want to make sure that I cover it thoroughly. So, that said, this week we're going to be talking about necromancy, aka talking to the dead. If I can get an edited video out, I'm going to be at least getting the script done. I'm also planning this month on talking about ancient Greek love spells, but I'm also planning on doing an entirely separate video on katadesmoi, aka curse tablets, lead curse tablets, because it's October, and even though in ancient Greece that doesn't really have that much significance when it comes to the dead, that would be Ganesia, which is significantly earlier in the year, it does for the Western world, quote unquote. So let's talk a little bit about some spooky stuff. Hopefully by the end of the month, I'm going to try to get these recorded sporadically. I am probably going to premiere them on Thursdays if I can get them done, but they might be sporadic premieres. If you're interested in any of those topics and you're new, make sure you hit the subscribe button. You can also join my Discord so that way you can get notified at least a day ahead of time when I'm going to be putting out videos, or at least a few hours ahead of time when premieres are going to be happening. If you guys are here, there's 103 of you. Holy shit, so many of you stuck through this. Please hit the like button or the dislike if you never want to see my face again. I'm thanking everybody that's new that hung out in my chat and was respectful. I didn't see an excessive amount of modding that needed to happen, so thank you guys so much for being respectful and for putting on your best faces for this. I hope for those of you that you guys, I hope for those of you that this is your first exposure to me, that I covered the arguments well and that you guys got a good idea of where we're coming from and how just deep and complex the topics of paganism and witchcraft ultimately are. Because they are. And one live stream is not going to be a primer on all of the ways in which our community is varied, but even just a glance at the live chat showed you just how many different kinds of pagans there were listening and how many atheist allies we had hanging out with us too. This is not something that is one size fits all by any means, and trying to claim that even a majority of us believe one particular thing or have one particular reason, apart from maybe that the majority of us had some kind of divine experience, because like that seems to be the one generalization that applies to most of us. But then again, there's a whole classification called mind blind, so you can't even make that. Trying to apply any major generalization apart from most of us are not Christian, Christo-pagans are not the majority, that's about the only generalization you can make about pagans in that holds water. Anything else, generalizations about political alignment, generalizations around motivation, around whether or not we've even had divine experiences, you can't, especially because of how many of us there are in the closet. For every answer you, for every aggregate data set you get that makes you think that you have some sort of conclusion, you're going to get another set from another community that's going to throw you off. Our diversity is part of our strength. It's part of what makes this movement, if you want to call it that, this diverse pseudo community that we have built so beautiful, because there's so much we can learn from each other. Except for folkists. Fuck folkists. So thank you guys that, for those of you that stuck through this, for those of you who are new to my channel, thank you so much for sticking through that. As always, thank you guys. I hope you have a wonderful night. And remember, we're stronger together.